against Rock Hudson's estate because Rock Hudson had sex with him and never told him he had AIDS. Now, you probably already read about this. Mr. Christian.
Have you ever wondered why lavender was once considered the most dangerous color in Hollywood? Not because it was ugly, but because it was a code. During the golden age, when you saw a lavish wedding or passionate kisses on a magazine cover, you thought it was a fairy tale ending. But to studio moguls, it was often just a rescue mission. A hastily arranged marriage to cover up one's true sexuality. A wife or husband hired to serve as a bulletproof shield against public opinion. They called them lavender marriages. Today, let's pull back the velvet curtain to look at 15 of history's most famous marriages, where the wedding ring was not a testament to love, but a tool for survival. Before we begin peeling back the layers of each story, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about the couple you are most curious about, because the image you've trusted for years might not remain intact after today's video. 1. Marlon Brando and Movita Castaneda, a rushed contract under the guise of destiny. In the dictionary of classic Hollywood, lavender marriage wasn't just a term, it was a survival tactic. It was a velvet screen erected to hide identities that didn't fit the mold of heroic men and virtuous women. And no screen was more dramatic, nor ending more farcical than the marriage between the wild one Marlon Brando and actress Movita Castaneda. In 1960, when Brando signed the marriage license with Movita, all of Hollywood breathed a sigh of relief. Before this, Brando was a ticking time bomb for studios, an acting genius with a chaotic private life surrounded by ceaseless whispers of fluid sexuality and same-sex relationships that terrified investors. Against this backdrop, Movita appeared as the perfect sedative. She was 7 years his senior private, and most importantly, carried an air of nostalgia. PR machines quickly spun a destiny script so beautiful it bordered on unreal. Movita had starred in Mutiny on the Bounty 1935, and Brando was set to lead the 1962 remake. They called it a convergence of generations of fate preordained. But the truth behind the lens was much colder. This wedding wasn't built on love, but on the need for a clean record. Hollywood didn't need Brando to be happy. They just needed him to look normal to protect million-dollar contracts. The real slap to this glamorous facade only came 8 years later. In 1968, when the marriage crumbled, the court delivered a shocking verdict. The marriage was annulled because Movita had never actually divorced her previous husband. This detail exposed a naked truth. The union between Brando and Movita was so loose that no one had even bothered to check the legal minimums. It was merely a rushed media project, prioritizing the image of a family man over the foundation of a real home. Marlon Brando used Movita to cover the storms within him, and Hollywood used both to feed a fabricated legend. When the velvet curtain closed, people realized some marriages are not born from the heart, but from the closed meeting rooms of film studios where truth is always secondary to image. If Brando's marriage was an emergency measure to calm the chaos, the next story reveals a much more sophisticated strategy where perfection was maintained for decades as a flawless camouflage.
For more than 50 years, Paul Newman was married to Joanne Woodward, a love story almost unheard of in Hollywood. On being faithful to his wife, Newman famously remarked, "I have steak at home, why go out for hamburgers?" And in 2002, the couple sat down with our own...
2. Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, the 50-year fortress and the art of managing perfection. If Marlon Brando's marriage was a hasty firefighting project, the alliance between Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward was a Hollywood architectural masterpiece. For half a century, they were worshipped as the only golden couple, untainted by the industry's mud. But in the world of lavender marriages, sometimes perfection isn't a natural gift, but a fortress built to be impenetrable. On January 29, 1958, under the harsh sun of Las Vegas, Paul and Joanne officially signed their life commitment. This was an incredibly strategic timeline. Just days earlier, Paul had finalized a scandalous divorce from his first wife, Jackie Witt. just as the public began scrutinizing the character and shadows of the actor with the world's bluest eyes, a marriage to a serious actress like Joanne Woodward became the sturdiest shield. It silenced the whispers, transforming Paul from a man who abandoned his wife into the model husband of the American dream. The deeper we go into the timeline, the more we see how skillfully Hollywood operated the storytelling machine around them. Newman once delivered a famous line, "Why go out for hamburger when you have steak at home?" That quote became a legendary slogan, an anesthetic for the public, ensuring no one wanted or dared to doubt the cracks inside. However, modern retrospectives and documentaries like The Last Movie Stars have inadvertently revealed a different reality. Paul Newman was a complex man, an alcoholic who lived in prolonged silence. The perfection we saw in People or Life magazines was actually Joanne's silent sacrifice. She accepted stepping back, giving up her own Oscar aura to build the image of the keeper of the flame. In classic Hollywood, when a leading man was suspected of non-conforming sexuality or interests deemed immoral at the time, the best way to protect him wasn't denial but creating an extreme opposite archetype. And Paul Newman was that archetype. They lived together for 50 years until death did them part in 2008, an unprecedented record. But ask yourself, can a love exist without a single ripple for 5 decades in the center of a scandal-ridden industry? Or was it the most enduring partnership agreement in history? When perfection becomes a billion-dollar brand, it is no longer a private matter, but a legacy to be protected at all costs. The next couple brings you an even stranger script. A relationship that never even had a marriage license yet was forcibly wed by the press to protect a symbol of youth. 3. James Dean and Pier Angeli. When the media writes an imaginary wedding. In this list, this is the strangest case because it never ended at an altar or with a marriage certificate. Yet it is a prime example of how the Hollywood system created an external relationship to quell doubts about an artist's private life. If other stars used marriage as a shield for James Dean, the studio used an unfinished romance as a screen. In the mid-1950s, James Dean was a risky gold mine for Warner Brothers. His image as a rebellious, reckless youth captivated the public, but whispers about his true sexual orientation were a nightmare for studio executives. To protect the image of the standard American boy, a romantic script with Italian beauty, Pier Angeli was pushed aggressively across tabloids. Instead of private parties, the couple frequently appeared at locations with pre-arranged paparazzi, exchanging calculated, intimate gestures. The media of the time hailed this as a forbidden love story, blocked by Pier's strict Catholic mother. According to documents released after their deaths, this prohibition was actually a perfect catalyst to explain why they could never marry while diverting public attention from Dean's true relationships behind the scenes. The most shocking event was Pier Angeli's wedding to singer Vic Damone in 1954. There is a classic legend that James Dean revved his motorcycle furiously outside the church to express his pain. However, many of Dean's close associates later revealed in retrospective documentaries, on that day, the actor wasn't even near the chapel. Those roaring motorcycle engines were likely just an exaggerated detail to reinforce the heartbroken bad boy image on the silver screen. In the end, James Dean left us too young, leaving behind an unsolved legend. But through the records of Hollywood historians, the relationship with Pier Angeli is viewed more as a risk management campaign. They didn't need marriage to cover the truth. They just needed to show the public a tragedy beautiful enough that no one would question the silences behind the life of the giant. What happens if a wedding isn't just for PR, but a race against time to cover up a scandalous secret? We now move on to the fourth couple, Anthony Perkins and Barry Berenson, where a baby and a hasty wedding became the security lock for the life of the psycho star.
I had always had a crush on Tony ever since I was...
From having seen him in pictures?
Yeah. So I had always wanted to meet him, and I finally did, and I figured that would be a good excuse.
4. Anthony Perkins and Barry Berenson, when silence is the highest covenant. August 1973, in the small coastal town of Wellfleet, Cape Cod, a wedding took place in strange quietude. The groom was Anthony Perkins, the man forever crucified by the haunting gaze of killer Norman Bates in Psycho. The bride was Barry Berenson, a young, promising photographer. No red carpet, no A-list stars. Just a few close friends, a priest, and Perkins' pet dog serving as best man. A detail both quirky and endearing, yet revealing the couple's maximum effort to withdraw from the outside world. Why would a major star choose such a small wedding? The answer lay in a short but weighty line in Time magazine back then. A baby is expected in January. In the social context of the 70s, this detail served as a tacit explanation for the rushed nuptials. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a race against time to erect a glass cage, protecting a standard masculine image before whispers about Perkins' private life could explode. The family maintained a perfect exterior with two handsome sons, Oz and Elvis. But according to later documents and interviews from insiders, that perfection came at the price of an atmosphere of constant vigilance. The eldest son, director Oz Perkins, later shared with the press about a childhood where his mother Barry made extraordinary efforts to shield her children from their father's shadows and secrets. They lived under one roof, but there always seemed to be closed doors no one was allowed to touch. It was a silent consensus. To preserve family happiness, they chose not to name the truth. The velvet curtain was finally torn in 1992 when Anthony Perkins passed away from AIDS-related complications, a disease he kept hidden until his very last breath to avoid public judgment. The tragedy didn't stop there. 10 years later, on September 11th, 2001, Barry Berenson perished on American Airlines Flight 11 as it crashed into the Twin Towers. Their deaths closed a chapter full of mystery, turning this marriage into a poignant Hollywood symbol, an alliance built on protection, maintained by silence, and ending in tragedies of their times. The next couple takes us back to a more classic Model A, wedding born directly from studio pressure to extinguish a genuine scandal. 5. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates. When the man of dreams needs a shield. Imagine Hollywood in the 1950s as a giant statue foundry, and Rock Hudson was its most flawless sculpture. Standing 6 feet 4 inches with a masculine face and a smile that melted millions of female hearts. Hudson wasn't just an actor, he was Universal Pictures' highest growth stock. But there was a subterranean crack beneath that statue. Whispers about his true sexuality began reaching tabloids like Confidential. The urgent contract marriage. According to film history documents and memoirs of insiders, when public pressure peaked, Henry Wilson Hudson's powerful and scheming agent stepped in. Wilson understood that if Hudson were exposed, millions in revenue would vanish into thin air. The solution was swift and cold: a wedding. The chosen one was Phyllis Gates, Wilson's own secretary. On November 9, 1955, a whirlwind wedding took place in Santa Barbara. To the public, this was a beautiful ending for the Bachelor star, but in reality, it was an image insurance deal. Phyllis wasn't a glittering starlet. She was ordinary enough for fans to feel safe, but loyal enough to keep secrets behind closed doors. The price of a role with no days off. However, the glossy paint of the golden couple soon peeled. According to divorce records filed in 1958, Phyllis Gates sued for mental cruelty, a legal term often used at the time to cover up unbridgeable gaps in marital life. Gates later published the memoir My Husband Rock Hudson, describing the extreme loneliness of living with a man who spent 24 hours a day playing the perfect husband for the cameras, but became a stranger when the flashbulbs died. Hudson's later life proved the cruelty of the studio system. He maintained the role of family man as long as possible until AIDS exposed everything in 1985. The marriage to Phyllis Gates wasn't built to last. It was designed to buy time for a legend. If Hudson's marriage was a reputation rescue operation, The next couple offers a moving chapter on belated awakening, where an insider bravely stepped out from the velvet curtain to speak the truth. 6. Angela Lansbury and Richard Cromwell, the verdict on 19-year-old innocence. If you're looking for the most damning evidence of the Lavender marriage concept, listen to the insider herself. Unlike the secrets buried in the graves of Rock Hudson or James Dean, Angela Lansbury's story was exposed by the lady herself, the boss of murder. She wrote when enough time had passed for pain to turn into empathy. On September 27, 1945, a 19-year-old Angela Lansbury walked down the aisle with actor Richard Cromwell. In the public eye, this was a model post-World War II Hollywood marriage, young, clean, and promising. But just 11 months later, on September 11, 1946, the court granted her divorce. It took decades for Angela to calmly name that mistake. In a public interview in her later years, she frankly shared, "I had absolutely no idea that I was marrying a gay man." For a girl not yet 20 at that time, sexuality was a concept outside her dictionary. She called it a colossal error of youth. Notably, archival newspaper clippings from 1946 on the Trove system reveal a very humane detail. It was Cromwell who actively advised Lansbury to divorce. He understood he couldn't give her the life she deserved, and continuing to play the husband was cruel to both. No scandal, no public denouncement. They parted in the silence of the studio system. This is a poignant example of how social pressure to get married turned two decent people into victims of a role with no ending script. And if this marriage ended quickly because the truth couldn't be hidden, the next story shows a completely different path where two people chose silence and companionship for over 3 decades. 7. Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas, the 34-year alliance of the upper class. Leaving the noise of film studios, we travel to Paris in 1919 to witness a completely different form of Lavender marriage. Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas. If Lansbury's marriage was a mistake, the marriage of musical genius Cole Porter was the most enduring strategic pact in art history. They married on December 18, 1919, at a town hall in Paris. Linda was a wealthy woman with solid social status and aristocratic elegance. Cole Porter was an ambitious composer carrying private secrets that high society at the time would not accept. Instead of acting out a passionate romance to deceive the public, they chose to live as the closest of allies. This relationship wasn't built on traditional romantic feelings, but on mutual understanding and protection. When Porter suffered a horrific riding accident in 1937 that left his legs nearly crippled, it was Linda who stepped up to reorganize his life. She cared for him, protected his creative space, and maintained the image of a stable family so Porter could continue contributing immortal music. According to documents from the American Heritage Center, although Porter had a complex private life, Linda remained the irreplaceable home front. When she passed away in 1954, she left her vast fortune to Porter as agreed decades earlier. Porter's complete collapse after his wife's death proved one thing. In the harsh world of difference, a Lavender marriage is sometimes not a lie, but a fortress of survival where two people choose to lean on each other against the world. In the next couple, we see a model of image stabilization so extreme it turned 2 decades of living together into a picture so perfect it was suspicious. 8. Janet Gaynor and Adrian, when the contract becomes living art. If other Hollywood marriages often ended with arguments in the papers, the alliance between Janet Gaynor and Adrian was as quiet as an oil painting. This is a rare example of a Lavender marriage built not to fix a scandal, but to create a space of freedom for two artistic souls. Janet Gaynor was the first woman in history to touch an Oscar statuette. Meanwhile, Adrian Adolph Greenberg was MGM's costume wizard, who turned Greta Garbo and Joan Crawford into global fashion icons. When they married on August 14, 1939, Hollywood insiders were surprised. Adrian was known for his refined lifestyle and whispers about his sexuality in elite circles, while Gaynor was at the peak of fame but craving peace. Instead of playing the passionate couple under flashbulbs in Los Angeles, the pair chose a smarter path. They moved to a remote farm in Anápolis, Brazil. According to biographical documents, this was the key to maintaining stability for 20 years. In Brazil, they were no longer scrutinized A-listers, but art lovers raising their son Robin and enjoying a pastoral life together. Their silence wasn't a harsh concealment, but a clever compromise. They showed the public a model family enough to satisfy the studios, but simultaneously created a private oasis to live as they wished. When Adrian died in 1959, Janet maintained complete respect for her partner, turning this marriage into one of the most enduring and elegant mysteries in Hollywood history. From such invisible stability, we move to a story where a brief marriage left a mask that lasted a lifetime. 9. Raymond Burr and Isabella Ward. The perfect mask of Perry Mason. There exists a fascinating paradox in Hollywood. The man who specialized in seeking the truth on screen was the one best at hiding the truth about his own life. To audiences of the 50s, Raymond Burr was a symbol of justice, a dignified bachelor. But after he passed away in 1993, a damning report regarding a fake biography stunned the public, exposing how the Lavender marriage system, combined with imagination, could create an identity that was absolutely perfect. It all began on January 10, 1948. Raymond Burr married Isabella Ward, an actress he met at the Pasadena Playhouse. But this was not a home. It resembled a temporary arrangement. They lived together in a Hollywood attic apartment, but almost never appeared hand in public. The marriage evaporated after just a few months when Isabella quietly returned to Delaware. It took 4 years, 1952, for the divorce to finalize, but for Burr's career, that was enough. He possessed a previously married record, a safe passage to join the ranks of unsuspected superstars. When the fame of Perry Mason exploded, Burr did not choose to remarry. Instead, he chose a brilliant psychological defense tactic: weaving a tragic past. According to research documents and later articles, Burr once moved the press to tears with stories of 2 widowed wives and a son lost to cancer. To this day, these details have no evidence in any official birth or death records. By turning himself into a sorrowful widower, he built a wall against curiosity about his private life that no one had the heart to break. All disguises only crumbled when his will was published. Raymond Burr left his entire estate worth over $32 million, including a vast vineyard in Sonoma, to a single man, Robert Benavides. They had silently lived and collaborated for 33 years since meeting on set in 1960. Raymond Burr's story is not just about a flash marriage to Isabella Ward, but a testament to the harsh reputation protection mechanisms of classic Hollywood. He lived the role of the lonely man completely in the public eye, so he could earn the right to live truly with his only love behind closed doors. If Raymond Burr used a tragic biography to cover the truth, the next couple offers a different lesson. There are PR marriages so forced that the stench of staging is so strong, audiences cannot help but be suspicious. Let's move on to Nils Asther and Vivien Duncan. 10. Nils Asther and Vivien Duncan. When the stench of acting overpowers the aura. If the previous 9 couples demonstrated the power of concealment, the story of Nils Asther and Vivien Duncan serves as a warning. The public won't just believe anything you throw at them. This is one of the strangest chapters of Hollywood during the transition from silent to sound film, where a lavender marriage was used as a sacrificial lamb for the rumors swarming around Sweden's most handsome actor at the time. Nils Asther possessed a masculine beauty so sharp he was dubbed the male Greta Garbo. However, his lavish, somewhat eccentric lifestyle and overly close relationships with male colleagues worried the studio. The solution offered in 1930, marry Vivien Duncan, one half of the famous Duncan sisters entertainment duo. Unlike the discretion of other couples, Nils and Vivien seemed forced to show off. According to archival press documents from photoplay at the time, their photos together always exuded a strangeness. Nils often looked into the distance or maintained a specific physical distance, while Vivien tried to play the role of the happy wife. The money shot of this story lies in the events following the birth of their first daughter Evelyn in 1931. Instead of cementing the family image, this marriage further revealed its fractured nature. According to shocking divorce files in 1933, Vivien accused Nils of extreme indifference. It is worth noting that in Hollywood back channels, people whispered that Nils couldn't even pretend to care about the role of husband for more than 2 years. After both passed away, film historians found the true pieces of the puzzle. In the biography of Nils Asther titled Narensum Scratida, the jester who laughed details about his true sexual orientation and the misery of living in a PR glass cage were exposed. The marriage to Vivien was essentially a failed deal. It helped Nils hide nothing, and instead left him more isolated within the harsh studio system. Nils Asther eventually left Hollywood to return to Europe, where he could live a life less scrutinized. Their story leaves an expensive lesson for studio moguls. If a marriage lacks minimum understanding, even the most talented photographers cannot turn it into a love story. When a PR wedding fails, it leaves scars. But there was another man, a legend of the silent era who turned the very ambiguity of his private life into a century-long legacy. Are you ready to decode the strangest wedding night in history with Rudolph Valentino and John Acker? 11. Rudolph Valentino and Jean Acker, the contract that died young outside the bedroom door. While the majority of Lavender marriages in Hollywood tried to maintain a facade of happiness for at least a few years to appease the studios, the marriage between sex symbol Rudolph Valentino and actress John Acker collapsed after exactly 6 hours. This wasn't a gradual breakup. It was an abrupt reversal right at the scene of the wedding night. On November 6, 1919, Valentino and Acker married to the shock of insiders. But according to Guinness World Records, this ceremony only existed in name until the couple walked toward their hotel room. Here, John Acker performed an act that became legendary. She entered the room, locked the door, and left her newlywed husband standing bewildered in the hallway. Valentino spent his entire wedding night knocking in vain before quietly leaving the next morning. Why did such an anticipated marriage end so quickly? Later retrospectives and biographies peeled back the layers of secrecy. This marriage was in reality never consummated physically. Many sources confirm that John Acker was at the time entangled in complex relationships with female colleagues, and marrying Valentino was merely a ploy to quell rumors about her own private life. There is even an anecdote that Acker left that very night to be with a former lover. For Valentino, this event was a slap in the face to the Latin lover image he was building, turning the wedding night into a tragedy of failed camouflage. Although a life together never existed, John Acker understood perfectly the brand value of the name she had just acquired. After separating, she fiercely fought a legal battle to keep the right to be billed as Mrs. Rudolph Valentino in film credits and magazines. For Acker, even if the marriage was a mistake, that title was a precious passport to maintain her presence in Hollywood for decades after Valentino's death. Their story is not just a record for brevity, but a testament to the fact that in Hollywood, sometimes people marry not to live together, but simply to own a name or a legal status before the public. The price of maintaining a title sometimes turns a person into a prisoner of the image they created. In the next couple, we move to a longer-term super project of the MGM empire, where a 12-year marriage was hailed as perfect, yet contained power compromises that remain controversial to this day. 12. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor, the 12-year super project of the MGM empire. If one had to choose a marriage that represented the sheer power of the studio system, it would undoubtedly be Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor. Not as fleeting as Valentino, Not as chaotic as Brando, this marriage spanning from 1939 to 1950 was a masterpiece of image management where the truth was buried under the aura of the title, Golden Couple. In the late 30s, Robert Taylor was MGM's ace, with a masculine beauty so perfect it was almost unreal, yet he was plagued by rumors of softness in his private life. Meanwhile, Barbara Stanwyck was a true iron lady, sharp and independent. MGM understood if they paired them up, they would create a firewall stopping all curiosity. For over a decade, the public was captivated by images of them riding horses at their ranch or appearing glamorously at premieres. The most valuable aspect of this couple was the emotional contradiction. Despite divorcing in 1951, Stanwyck continued to call Taylor the love of her life until the day she died. However, Hollywood insiders and retrospective documents paint a different picture. They suggest this marriage was a companionship agreement rather than a passionate romance. There were rumors of Taylor having affairs to find freedom and questions about Stanwyck's own private life, but absolutely no official evidence ever leaked out. This is the pinnacle of Hollywood mythology. When the system is strong enough to turn evidence-free voids into a beautiful legend, making the public no longer want to question the truth behind it. And while a marriage like Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor still hangs suspended between true love and unverifiable Hollywood legend in the next story, a wedding only needed to hit the front page for a single day for the entire system to pivot in a completely different direction. 13. Johnny Ray and Marilyn Morrison, the 24-hour headline and the hopeless whitewashing attempt. In Hollywood and the American entertainment industry of the early 1950s, there was an unwritten rule that both the media and studios understood very well. If a name started appearing in the press with dangerous undertones, the fastest way to clean it up was not to deny but to create a different story big enough to cover it. Johnny Ray's wedding is a prime example of that mechanism. Before becoming a national music phenomenon, Johnny Ray was involved in a sensitive incident in 1951 in Detroit, when he was arrested in a sting operation regarding moral charges in a public restroom. Although the incident didn't lead to a serious criminal conviction, it left a mark on his record that at the time could completely destroy any artist's career if exploited at the right moment. Shortly after, Johnny Ray unexpectedly shot to stardom thanks to an emotional performance style completely different from male singers of the era. The public called him the Prince of Tears, and the press began building an image of a sensitive, fragile artist, yet still within acceptable bounds. And just as his career was taking off, another event was launched. On May 26, 1952, Johnny Ray married Marilyn Morrison, and this wedding was immediately plastered on the front page of the New York Daily News. In just 24 hours, the headlines shifted from whispers about the past to the image of a stable, married man who was on the right path. This is a clear example showing that a wedding wasn't just a personal matter, but a media tool carrying the weight of an emergency PR campaign. However, notably that marriage wasn't long enough to create a foundation for a new life. Ray and Morrison separated after just a year and officially divorced in 1954. Although the wedding successfully changed the headlines for a moment, it couldn't completely erase media memory, nor prevent old questions from gradually returning when Ray's aura began to fade. Later in biographies and retrospective articles, Johnny Ray is often cited as a typical case of an artist trapped between talent, social prejudice, and a system that always sought to control the narrative rather than address the root cause. The marriage to Marilyn Morrison, viewed from a historical distance, was not a romantic failure, but a testament to how marriage was once used as a media switch turned on at the right moment and switched off when no longer effective. From a wedding designed to change newspaper headlines, the next story takes us back to the center of the studio system, where marriage wasn't just to quell rumors but used as a complete reset button for a star on the brink of total collapse. 14. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli, the reset button. Among the shards of MGM. Imagine Hollywood as a giant factory, and Judy Garland was the precious gem being worked to exhaustion. By the mid-1940s, the innocent Dorothy of yesterday had fallen into a spiral of sedatives, nervous breakdowns, and suffocating control from the studio. MGM needed a solution to salvage this million-dollar asset. And so Vincente Minnelli, the genius director with an aesthetic eye but filled with mysterious silences, was written into the script of her life as a powerful reset button. In 1945, they married. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a massive image upgrade project. To the public, this was the union of a glittering superstar and a masterful intellectual artist. The studio wanted the world to believe Judy had found her harbor. She was stable and ready to continue generating profit. However, according to retrospective documents and the biography, Get Happy, the life of Judy Garland, Vincente Minnelli was a man living in conflict. Whispers about his private life in New York before coming to Hollywood had long simmered in artistic circles. Pairing them up was like a strange symbiosis. Minnelli brought Garland a look of class and intellect. Garland gave Minnelli a safe passport to enter the ranks of the most powerful gentlemen in the cinema capital. The birth of Liza Minnelli in 1946 was the climax of this script. A perfect family appeared on magazine covers, but in reality, behind the doors of their villa, the fractures were irreparable. Garland continued to slide into personal crises while Minnelli immersed himself in work to maintain a falsely aesthetic world. They divorced in 1951, right as Garland was fired by MGM. This detail exposes the cruel nature of the system. When the reset button no longer worked and the star could no longer generate profit, this Lavender marriage was immediately killed off. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli played a role together for 6 years, not to build happiness but to sustain an industrial machine that never knew the meaning of enough. But when a studio-arranged marriage couldn't patch the deepening cracks of the system, Hollywood was forced to find another option, more discreet. Much later acting as the final lock for a perfect gentleman image in the next story. 15. Cary Grant and Diane Cannon, the final lock for a gentleman legend. This list concludes with the heaviest name, the man who defined American male elegance, Cary Grant. But look at the year 1965, the moment he married young actress Diane Cannon. This wasn't a wedding of beginnings. It was like a final summary to close all the questions that had dogged him for 3 decades. 12 years prior to Diane, Cary Grant had a relationship lasting over a decade with actor Randolph Scott. They lived together in a house the press called Bachelor Hall. Although the studio tried to release photos of them cooking or exercising together to look like a pure friendship, whispers of an unofficial Lavender marriage always simmered. When he married Diane Cannon in 1965, who was 33 years his junior, Cary Grant seemed to want to make a final statement before retiring from the screen. A beautiful young wife, a daughter born shortly after all, were perfect pieces to complete the portrait of the eternal, charming gentleman. Yet this marriage lasted less than 3 years. In the shocking divorce files of 1968, Diane Cannon described a Cary Grant completely different from his on-screen elegance, controlling cold and full of psychological instability. According to later biographical documents, this was a period where Grant tried to use marriage and psychological therapies to self-correct into the mold society expected. The final lock, named Diane Cannon, helped Cary Grant maintain his image until the day he died. It showed that in Hollywood, even when you are a legend, you still need a wedding at the right time to protect your legacy before the velvet curtain closes forever. The journey through these 15 Lavender marriages is not just about reopening old Hollywood files, but about understanding a harsh era. In the golden age of the cinema capital, truth was sometimes a luxury item that even the most powerful stars could not afford. They married, they smiled, and they played the longest roles of their lives, right within their own homes. Not to deceive the audience, but to protect their right to work, their right to contribute, and sometimes to protect their own safety. Those velvet screens may carry the color of calculation, but they are also filled with sacrifice and painful compromises. Looking back, we do not judge because in a system intolerant of difference, marriage was the final lifebuoy. Those secrets now lie with the past, but they remind us behind every brilliant flashbulb are souls who had to learn to live with their own shadows. Thank you for joining us in uncovering the tumultuous hidden corners of classic Hollywood. Each love story, whether real or just a media script, is a piece that creates the dazzling yet mysterious face of cinematic history. Among the 15 couples we just discussed, whose story surprised you or resonated with you the most? Do you think the price of fame is worth trading the truth of an entire lifetime? Leave your thoughts in the comments so we can discuss. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next journey to decode backstage secrets on the channel. See you in the next video.